Boker Tov, everybody. Shalom Aleichem. Apologize for the delay here. And it looks like my computer is crashing. Is it? I hope not. Apparently not. Sorry. My computer has not been cooperating with me this morning. It's been slower than molasses in a blizzard. And it looks like it's okay. So, God willing, it will be okay. So, Baruch Hashem. Okay, well, I'm glad to be in the office with you today, and very much a blessing to be here with all of you. I'm just looking at my calendar, kind of getting an assessment here. So, yes, glad to be here. And now, thank all of you for everybody for praying for my father. I apologize for the confusion. There was supposed to be a surgery last week, and that got rescheduled for this week. But then the hospital was having challenges with their staffing and things like that. So it has been set for the 5th of April. And we met with the surgeon and everything. So it's going to be the 5th of April. And so next week, I regrettably will be out of town again. We will not be having the Aliyah next week because of all of that going on. So I apologize for that. It can't be helped. It's a very, very, serious surgery. It's not anything light. In fact, it's about as serious as it gets. So appreciate your continued prayers for my dad. So on that. So what I wanted to do this week, we should be looking at Parashat Tazria. And by the way, this coming Shabbat is Rosh Chodesh, and we begin the month of Nisan, which is a month of miracles. Praise God. Praise God. So this coming Friday is the very last month of Adar 2, which we've had, 2 Adars this year. So therefore, we have the double portion of joy, the increase of our joy. That's what, Adar is all about. And then we get to Nisan, and Nisan is a month of miracles. In fact, we'll be sure in post. I'll be sure and post my teaching I did on Nisan, so everybody can review that and come to understand the insights related to that. What I wanted to do this morning is deviate from our original flight plan and take a tour of this week of the Haggadah or the Haggadah of Pesach. What is the Haggadah? What is the Haggadah? And essentially looking at some insights into Passover, but particularly looking at the Haggadah. What is the Haggadah or the Haggadah, however you want to pronounce it? And the answer to that is the word means telling. And it's essentially a booklet, a book that is used for the Passover Seder. Now, what is unfortunate is that most people who are believers in the Messiah, and this is so sad to me, and it's one of those things where it's so unfortunate that so much was, I don't know if you want to use the word stolen from us, stolen from people, kept from people, whatever. But when the Roman pagan emperor Constantine invented Christianity, when he created Christianity in the 4th century, I've got stuff popping up here I'm trying to delete. He made sure, he and his, bishops, church fathers, made sure that the Messiah and the gospel and everything was completely separated from anything even remotely Jewish. And, so and to include his name. So it's interesting. So here we have the Haggadah, and what people don't know about the Haggadah is that as much as the Torah itself, maybe even more than the Torah itself, Jewish people have read and studied the Haggadah. And there have been, I read one time historically that as much as the Bible itself has been the printing of the Haggadah. And most believers have no idea what I'm even talking about, which is not your fault. Okay, it's not your fault at all. But it's unfortunate. Why is it so unfortunate? Because the Haggadah is all about the Exodus of Egypt, and it's all about telling the story. The most important mitzvah of the Passover Seder. People might, if I asked somebody and said, when we're going to have the Passover Seder, what's the most important mitzvah? By the way, completely off topic, one of our precious little teenagers here made me this little dog out of the craft pipe cleaners. Isn't that so cute? It's so precious. I keep it on my desk here. I love that kind of stuff. And also our penguin. I can't forget our penguin. We haven't mentioned the penguins in a while. They watch the penguins from Antarctica. It's starting to become spring. No, it's not. It's actually winter because it's the other side. So it's winter for them. So they're still, the thing about it is winter and summer is the same. It's always negative 100, but they love it. Anyway, enough about that. The the Haggadah talks about the story of the Exodus. And if I ask somebody, what is the most important mitzvah of the Passover Seder, which is always, by the way, on the 14th of Nisan, according to the Hebrew calendar, the Jewish calendar, which is the only valid calendar. And somebody might say, well, the most important mitzvah is eating matzah, or the most important mitzvah is eating the bitter herbs, or the most important mitzvah is whatever. I don't think that most people, my bet would be that most people would not know what's the most important mitzvah. And the most important mitzvah is to tell the story, which is what the word Haggadah means. And there's a point in the Seder, there's a step called the Magid, or Magid. And that means to tell, to proclaim, to preach. In fact, a lot of the Hasidic masters sometimes had a title of Magid. It means like preacher, to tell the story. Now, isn't that intriguing? Because for centuries, we, the Jewish people, have been teaching ourselves and our families and our children this story. The most important story ever to be told is in biblically in the Judaism is the story of the Exodus. Why? Because it is the gospel. And I have seen people who have never understood this. Now, I did a teaching that you can search on our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel has a little search box. And if you search the gospel explained, there's a drosh whereby I explain the gospel using the Exodus. Now, what I just said seems kind of, I explained the gospel using the Exodus. Well, the Exodus is the gospel. But anyway, I digress. So the Haggadah here is there are many different copies. I don't want to say versions, because the Haggadah is pretty much always the same. Like everybody's Passover Seder follows the same steps. There might be minor variations, but that's in terms of customs or whatever, but the steps of the Haggadah are the same across the board. So therefore, when we go through the Passover Seder as a Jewish community, our Pesach that we have here is the exact same Pesach that is being had in the Ukraine. It's the same Pesach that's being had in France. It's the same Pesach that's being had in Australia, South Africa, Brooklyn. Wherever the Jews are, they're having the same Pesach, according to the Haggadah. Now, there are, as I said, many different. It's one of these things through the centuries has been published and been read and studied, even as much, maybe more than the Torah itself. I have collected well over a dozen Haggadot over the years. You say, well, why do you need so many different ones? Well, they come with different insights. So, as an example, I have a Haggadah here from the Gutnik Haggadah. I have a Haggadah here from the Kehot Chumash. I have a Haggadah here that has the comments and insights from Sefer Seimes. I have a Haggadah here from that has to do the insights focus on Musar. I have a Haggadah here that is Sephardic. A Haggadah here from the what's this one? The Hassam Sofer. Another one is from Ramban. Another one is from the Vilna Gaon that I have. These different ones, and so you get these different insights. And then, of course, I wrote a Haggadah for our shul, and the reason I did that is so that because I wanted to connect the dots between these insights that I have read and studied through the years through to Yeshua. And I've been meaning for the last couple of years to do a revision of it because there's so much more to say, but it's it's extremely time consuming and I haven't done it yet. So, but what we have is more than enough now in our little Haggadah that we use. And so the other thing about this people don't understand, it's a shame that we don't study this, is because the Last Supper, the Last Supper, which interestingly, if you look at the pictures of the Last Supper, is always depicted with big loaves of like Hawaiian bread, is actually a Passover Seder. And, it's anyway. So here we are going to push back the frontiers of ignorance. And we're going to begin to look at the Passover Seder, because now is the time, my friends, to begin to prepare for Pesach. Okay? We have to begin to prepare for Pesach. Now is the time to begin cleaning out the Chametz. Let me explain what Chametz is. Sorry. I've had a sheet out. I put a sheet out before we went out of town that everybody had here at the synagogue, and I think I may have already uploaded it to Ask the Rabbi page, but if I haven't, I will. But Chametz, let me explain what Chametz is. You gotta say Chametz. Chametz is not yeast. Say that with me. Say it to yourself right now. You might be driving on the road and the wind blowing through your hair, or you might be sitting down having a cup of coffee, and I want you to say to yourself, I want this to be like a mantra. Chametz is not yeast. Chametz is not yeast. Chametz is not yeast. I want you to go to bed at night saying that. Chametz is not yeast. When you're working out at the gym, I want you to say to yourself in between reps, Chametz is not yeast 1. Chametz is not yeast 2. I want you to say that. Why? Because everybody says that. It's wrong. Chametz is not yeast. And many people end up eating chametz on Pesach because they've been taught, usually by non-Jews, that chametz is yeast. It's not. Chametz is also not really leaven per se. I mean, it is, but it isn't. Okay, so what is it? You gotta say chametz. Chametz. Thank you, Joe. Joe. Then what is chametz? Thank you, Joe. Great segue. Chametz is one of the 5 grains that has come in contact with water. That's it. What does that mean? What are the 5 grains? The 5 grains are wheat, barley, oats, spelt, and rye. Wheat, barley, oats, spelt, and rye. That's the 5 grains, and those 5 grains only. If they have come in contact with water, then they are chametz. This means that any product at all, any product at all that has one of those 5 grains in it that has been, what's the word I'm looking for? Processed, it is chametz. Yes, Joe. So let's say, so Joe's question, so if wheat, barley, oats, spelt, rye is dry, we can keep it. That is correct. So suppose you had a bag of flour, and that's all it was. It was just flour, but it is unopened, or therefore in a container that is, it's not wet, it's dry. Then it is not chametz. That applies to any of the other 5 grains. If you have a container that for some reason is a mixture of wheat and barley together, it is not chametz. And here's the big one. Are you ready? Say this with me. Chametz is not yeast. Chametz is not yeast. Chametz is like from the movie The Mummy. Chametz is not yeast. If you have a container of yeast, now I guarantee you, what's funny about this is that I promise you, I will have people call this office, which is fine. We don't mind. But people will contact us and say, is yeast chametz? It's totally fine. But people, if you have a container of yeast in your house, it is not chametz. It's only, and by the way, if you had a sack of flour that had for some reason, yeast sprinkled on top, that's not chametz either. What makes chametz is agua, H2O, water, moisture. So if you have cereal that has one of those 5 grains in it, it's chametz. If you if you have, and you have to watch this, because if you have, sometimes there are canned products that you wouldn't think had wheat in it. Like there's some kosher soup brands, for instance, that you might think, I don't know, just throwing it out there as a hypothetical, it would have like a tomato soup or something. And unbeknownst to you, it says it's kosher, but what you don't realize is that it actually has, let's say they threw some spelt in there for some reason. I don't know. I'm not saying, just hypothetical. That's where you have to watch it. Okay. So this is why when you're going through your products at the house that are canned goods and boxed goods, like pasta, for instance, is chametz. It's chametz. And you say, well, it's dried pasta. Yeah, but it has been flour. It has come in contact with water. That's how they made the pasta, and they dried it. It's still chametz. You got to either eat it or get rid of it. Or if you have a big bunch of it for some reason, like, you have like, you really, really, really like pasta, and so you have like 100, pounds of it or something like that, you can sell it to a neighbor. That selling it is actually a kosher thing to do. And you can ask. We're not going to talk about that right now, but you can email us about that later. And so some people have said, "How can I sell my chametz? Doesn't chametz represent sin? So I'm basically selling my sin." No, you're not, and it doesn't represent sin. But we'll come back to that. The other thing I wanted you to be aware of is that chametz is not limited to just food items. Chametz also applies to drinks, particularly if you happen to have any whiskey in the house or other things like that, like scotch, certainly beer, obviously. So all that's chametz too. So beer is chametz. So, whiskey is chametz. Scotch is chametz. Anything, alcohol, any beverage that's been made with one of those 5 grains is chametz. Now, there's other alcoholic things, as an example. Vodka, corn vodka is not chametz. Angela's question. That's great, because I was about to mention this. Corn vodka is not chametz. Rum is not chametz. Now, there's different. Now, in certain Jewish communities that are super stringent, they may not keep it in their house because they're concerned that it might have been made in a facility that had chametz in it. But we don't apply that, in my opinion, and it's my opinion as the rabbi of our community, we don't apply that level of what I believe to be needless stringencies. Some people really enjoy stringencies; they really get into it, and I guess that's okay, I suppose. But it can be unhealthy. Joe, why is the rum gone? It's funny. White distilled vinegar can be chametz, although I read an article some years ago that in Los Estados Unidos, most of the white vinegar is made with corn. So our ruling is that if the product is made in the United States, it's probably okay, but it's really best to just get rid of it. And the guys and gals, I want you to understand something here. A lot of times we talk about throwing stuff away. If you're like us, we don't like to throw stuff away. We're frugal people. But I want you to keep in mind that, I was about to say that we're not really talking about that much money. But of course, in today's economy, that may not be true. But the actual fact is, if you've got a half a bottle of ketchup and you're wringing your hands over throwing it out, just throw it out. I mean, really. You can always, it's just for a week, and you can always go back to the store the week after Pesach and buy more. So there's other things like that too. And you have to be concerned sometimes about, like during the week of Pesach, we make sure and buy our dogs grain-free snacks and grain-free dog food, etc. So that is chametz. Now, chametz does not represent sin. That surprises a lot of people because they've been taught incorrectly. I do want to say something, and I don't mean to be, I don't know. I don't want to sound bad, but there's some of you who've been around us for a long time, and that's great. And there's others who are new. And people contact me all the time, which is great. And they ask us questions about, hey, I was told this about Jews. Is that true? 9 times out of 10, it's not true. Usually it's 9.5 times out of 10, it's not true. And my caution to you is, if you have learned anything about Jews and Judaism from a non-Jew, like a Hebrew roots person, or certainly a pastor, or some type of Christian teacher, if you've learned anything about Jews or Judaism from somebody who is not Jewish and does not practice Judaism, and that would include Messianic Jewish rabbis, quote unquote, who are Jewish by birth but don't actually practice Judaism, then you should assume that it's suspect. If you've learned anything, you should assume it's most likely not accurate. That's how you should approach it. And I'm just going to tell you that for your own benefit, because it's through the last 20 years, it's been remarkable, the disinformation, and it's not intentional. It's not like a conspiracy. It's not the Illuminati out there. But it's just ignorance, and they just don't know what they don't know. And so anyway, so there's that. So people learn that chametz means sin. It doesn't. Chametz is actually worse than sin. It's actually the root of sin. That's what chametz represents. Chametz represents the that which puffs up, and it's the pride, the puffiness that leads to sin. And so that's what chametz represents. Now we want to get chametz. We have to get literally chametz out of our house. Literally, you have to get it out of your house or anywhere that belongs to you. So you can't put chametz in Like you couldn't take it and store it in the garage or your shop. Let's say you owned a shop across town. If you own it, it can't be there. In fact, there's a story of a liquor merchant who used to take his barrels of whiskey and he took them and he would hide them or whatever in a unowned place, because it has to be out. Scripturally, it has to be outside of our things that we own, out of our possession. So you have to get rid of it. But naturally, when we're talking about chametz, we're talking about the literal chametz, but clearly the heavier matter is to get rid of the spiritual chametz in our life. We want to rid ourselves of pride and arrogance, and so this is natural. This is, by the way, where spring cleaning comes from. Spring cleaning comes from cleaning the chametz out of our homes. And incidentally, when the Jewish people clean out the chametz is not yeast. We clean out the chametz, it's a very thorough cleaning. It's not limited to the kitchen. You go through your whole house and you search for breadcrumbs. And there's other things through the week. We'll get into some of these other customs, but it includes going through your books, which is a lot for some of us, and fanning the pages so that crumbs will fall out. The point, in fact, is it's a deep cleaning, and it's supposed to engender in us the fact that we have to go deep into the recesses of our heart and clean out that pride, clean out that arrogance, clean out. We got to look in the crevices and the corners. We can't just do a superficial cleaning. The Rebbetzin through the years has koshered the kitchen for Pesach. She will take, which is customary, take boiling water and pour it out over the countertops in the kitchen. She'll boil some of our pots and pans. Then she'll take either wax paper or cellophane or something like that and put it over the counter. There's things that you do. You make special preparation for Pesach, and we can discuss some of those customs and things like that. But the main thing I want to communicate to you, this is why I tell people start early. Start getting rid of that stuff now. Eat it up or whatever, or give it away, or just throw it away. Start to talk to, your family about, hey, what do we have that's chametz? Hey, now is not the time to go out and buy the 6-pack of cereal, that type of thing. Now, the 14th of Nisan, you cannot put it in the garage, Marcella. You cannot put chametz anywhere that you own the space. You have to get it completely out of your possession. If you own the property, it can't be there. That's the garage. That's the yard. That's your car, right? Your office. You understand? It has to be completely gone from any place that you own. Now, on the 14th of Nisan, we have what's called the Seder, which is the special meal that we have with the special elements. We have the Seder plate and the Seder elements and so on. And the word Seder itself means order. There's a Pesach Seder, there's an Erev Shabbat Seder, there's other Seders. Yes, Rebbetzin says, clean out your toasters, waffle irons, bread bowls, ovens. Yeah, see, it's a very deep clean. This is if you happen to have a self-cleaning oven, this is the time where you'd want to push that little baby on and self-clean it. But you're right. Rebbetzin is right. She's got to clean out the toasters. It's not just her. We all do. All of us, me, Hadassah, everybody, we get involved. We clean and we vacuum and we, deep cleaning. But again, we're doing this, and you can't, at the same time, you have to understand, I've got to clean out my heart. But don't make the mistake that a lot of people make. Well, it's really metaphorical, so therefore I don't have to get rid of the chametz. And guys, a lot of people will say, well, I don't want to, I mean, that's a big container of pancake mix. I don't really want to get rid of it. Get rid of it. Trust God. Okay. Better to be obedient than, just hold on to a $10 bag of pancake mix. You're probably never going to eat anyway. So the goal of the Seder is not merely to remember the past, but to relive it. That's the other thing about the Pesach Seder. Pesach itself, as I've said about every Jewish holiday, is not a memorial. We are actually spiritually, supernaturally experiencing the Pesach every time we have Pesach. Okay? And something else that the sages have said, which is critical, is that every Jew must see themselves as if he or she were personally set free from Egypt. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your personal experience. When we sit down to the Pesach Seder, we are personally reliving that moment of our deliverance. And you have to see this story. You have to see this story as your story. And that's what's so important. This is not the story of your ancestors. This is not the story of a people. This is the tragedy of Christianity. The tragedy of Christianity is we didn't make it. People allowed this to be somebody else's story. Now, you can't steal the story and take it from them and take it for yourself. You have to join the people, right? Which is what conversion is all about. But this has to be your story. So the goal of the Seder is not to merely remember the past, but to relive it and thereby, I love what this says. This is, by the way, from the Kehot Haggadah, and thereby influence our present. The Seder experience should change us. That's the other point I wanted to bring out. It should change us. And listen to this next sentence. It should influence our behavior long after the Seder night has concluded. This has to transform us. It has to bring us out. The famed Maharil, Rabbi Yaakov ben Moshe Halevi Molin writes, every person should tremble with awe to follow the instructions of the sages who instituted the order of the Seder and the Haggadah. Do not take the matter lightly. Even if there are some things at the Seder that do not seem critical to you, act prudently to observe them, for there is nothing trivial among them. Incidentally, there are certain steps to the Seder. How many of you remember or know or have been told that there were 15 steps that led up to the temple? 15 steps. Well, it's interesting because in ancient times, 2,000 years ago more, the sages instituted the Pesach Seder with 15 steps. So what was taught is that when we sit down at the Pesach Seder, we begin at the lowest step. We begin at the place of idolatry. Because remember, we're going back to Egypt, as it were, to relive that moment of deliverance. And in Egypt, we were idolaters. And so we begin at this low level. And through the night, when we go through the Seder, we perform every step. We go up the ladder. We go up the steps, as it were. We go from this realm, this world, to the upper world. We elevate 15 steps until ultimately we're at the throne of glory. We stand we sit rather at the Seder night, and we are taking steps up towards the kingdom of God. What's interesting is that even though we are reliving the moment and we start at a low level in implementing remembering that we were slaves in Egypt, slaves to sin. That's the thing. See, we were slaves to idolatry. Even so, we begin the night as royalty. What about the convert? What does Judaism say about the convert in the Pesach Seder? It says it would seem that converts ought to be exempt from celebrating Pesach, since neither they nor their ancestors were in Egypt. The Torah therefore tells us in Numbers 9:14, if a convert will dwell with you, he shall prepare a Pesach offering. The words with you means as one of you. For within our exodus lies an eternal redemption for the soul of the convert as well. The exodus was not merely a physical migration, but a spiritual redemption that affected all of Israel. And remember, converts are as much a Jew as Moses. And it says, and this includes the souls of everyone who would become connected to Israel, even though it was not yet revealed. Isn't that beautiful? So the Pesach Seder, ladies and gentlemen, is for everybody. I mentioned that when we sit down at the table, we are royalty. And one of the most beautiful customs of the Seder, the one that I enjoy the most, is the custom of pouring each other's wine. You never pour your own wine at a Pesach Seder. Or grape juice. You can use kosher grape juice. And the reason you never pour your own wine is because you're a king or a queen. And somebody else should pour your wine for you. And you, therefore, pour your wine for somebody else. So the beautiful part about it is, and this is why I love this custom, because at the Seder, you're a royal person. You're a royalty. So therefore, you never pour your own glass of wine. Somebody else is pouring wine for you. And at the same time, you are pouring wine for somebody else. So even though you're royalty and you're not pouring your own wine, because royals don't pour their own wine, at the same time, you're being a servant leader and pouring wine for somebody else. Fulfilling what the Mashiach taught, that whoever's the greatest among you should be the servant to all. And isn't that beautiful? There are many, many things about the Pesach Seder that are beautiful, beautiful customs. And through this week, God willing, we're going to get into these teachings. I'm going to be pulling some excerpts out from the different Haggadah that I have and giving you insights that with God's help, we'll work through the entire Seder night, because I want you to go into the Pesach Seder with a level of expectation, with a level of understanding, with a level of clarity of thought, and more importantly, with a spiritual kedusha that is going to bring down the blessings of this important holiday. I want you to understand that. So God bless all of you. We'll come back tomorrow with more teachings and more insights. Until then, have a very blessed and wonderful day. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your continued prayers for my father and all of us. So God bless you. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Shalom Aleichem.